Good morning, everyone. I was very enthusiastic to hear that some of you have had our beer before, so thank you for that. I will, on that note, I need to start with an apology. I would not be a professional in the beer industry if I didn't apologize for not having beer. It's somewhat blasphemous for any of us in the industry to go anywhere without having beer, so I do apologize for that. But luckily our neighbors over on the east side are providing you with great caffeine back there. So what I would like to do this morning, at least, is take you on a bit of a journey, a climate journey. When I told Ben that I wanted to talk about climate, I had a lot of things in mind. Climate is dynamic environmentally. We talk about the climate a lot, it's in the news. But there are also a lot of other climates that we all interact with. Our journey, though, is going to involve a lot. It's going to involve art. It's going to involve some business, government, unfortunately, because we make beer. But at the center of all that, we're going to talk about beer as well. So that ought to be entertaining. The beginning. I like to think, for me, how many of you have been to Abilene, Texas? Anyone? Abilene, Texas. Bless you. I was born in Abilene, Texas. And my journey as an entrepreneur, I like to think at least, started in third grade. Sounds bizarre. But in Abilene, in third grade, I was 88. Great year to be in third grade, right? I was somewhat of a troublemaker, I guess you could say. Never terrible trouble, but just enough to, for some reason, stay on the radar of just about every teacher in the schools that I've gone through. Third grade was where that kind of began, unfortunately. My parents like to say that after this story I'm going to tell you, they think that my chances of ever being employable just went completely downhill. But in third grade, a specific day in third grade, I was trying to pass a note to a friend of mine. Like most third graders in '88, we were talking about, the Reagan administration, things like that. But my note got intercepted, unfortunately, by my teacher. This was a regular occurrence, was a little bit disappointed in me and informed me that this time I had gone too far and detention was the next thing for me, right? Unfortunately, my mom also taught at the same elementary school, so I didn't have time to make up a story before I got home. I was already in trouble before I even made it to detention. So I approach my teacher at the end of the day. She proceeds to tell me the work that I've got to do for detention, cleaning tables, stacking chairs, things of that nature. Seemed reasonable, right? I was going to serve my punishment. But it got a little interesting at that point because the wheels started turning in my head. Sure, I had been caught passing a note. Sure, I was in trouble. I was in detention. But I felt like there was a lot of opportunity in this particular scenario. So I looked my teacher in the eye after we wrapped up and proceeded to inquire about my hourly pay, right? Naturally. If I'm going to do work, I should get paid for it, right? Isn't that how this whole thing works? Turns out that's not how this whole thing works, in third grade at least. So that was kind of the beginning of my realization that I wanted to work for pay, right? This whole detention thing was not really what I was into. In third grade, the economic climate, see what I did there, was pretty dismal for a young man that's in trouble, especially. It was also dismal in 2009 when I decided that I wanted to open a brewery. Breweries are great things. I think from everyone sitting here, you can at least appreciate the fact that beer is a great social beverage, right? Locally made beer is even better. I started making beer also in Abilene, another place that seems to center around me doing some rebellious things. For those of you that are familiar with Abilene, there's a university there, Abilene Christian University. I went to school there. It was an interesting place. The moral climate pretty much dictated everything at ACU. When I was there in '99, you were not allowed to drink alcohol, regardless of your age. You could be a 40-year-old PhD candidate, still can't drink alcohol. There were separate men's and women's swimming times in the pool. Mixed bathing was not allowed at Abilene Christian University. But I had a full scholarship to go to ACU, so I had the wherewithal to realize I need to stick it out here. And I decided to adapt and get creative. My friends and I, who were studying biology at the time, found out through a little bit of research that although we were not 21, we could buy all the raw materials needed to make beer, right? There's no alcohol in grain and hops and water and yeast. You've got to bring all those together to create the alcohol. So we started making beer at home as 19-year-olds in Abilene, Texas. And we became somewhat popular, for sure. We had a lot of people that came out of the woodwork that all of a sudden wanted to talk to us about everything and be our friends and such as that. So we had fun with that. We convinced some friends to buy the ingredients, and we would make it. You know, we would serve the labor side. They would provide the raw materials. Everyone had beer. It was fantastic. That went on for my entire time at ACU. It is very nice now to say, my folks still live in Abilene. I make it back periodically. Those rules are now gone. Abilene has evolved. The moral climate has evolved. You're allowed to drink alcohol there if you're of age. They actually have mixed bathing now, believe it or not, out there in West Texas. So things have definitely changed. Now we're going to fast forward up to 2009. So I decide making beer is a lot of fun. I lived in Boulder for a little while before I moved to Austin. I moved here to help open a running store. It was a lot of fun. A lot of people think running and beer don't go together. Those of you that run and drink beer know that they go together incredibly well. But what I found in Boulder when I lived there was this incredibly supportive town around beer. If you made beer, it was great. People went to breweries at the end of the day to have a pint. People gathered, they solved problems, they hashed out new ideas, they were creative, they were artistic, they talked about current events, and beer was always kind of the central piece of that. I fell in love with that. It was something that I wanted to be a part of. I romanticized about opening a brewery and being in there mucking out grain and wearing boots and all of those romantic visions you see, having a beard, you know, things like that that everyone in the brewing industry does. Oddly enough, everyone in the brewing industry does not drink beer first thing in the morning, contrary to popular belief. We drink coffee, which, you know, makes a lot of sense. But when I decided that I wanted to do this for a living, I was very naive. I can't lie about that. I had no idea what it would take financially to open a brewery. I had no idea how to run the entire operations of a brewery. But I had a vision, and I believed in it. And I like to look back at it now and laugh at how naive I was, because it was an incredibly, incredibly romantic vision that materialized very quickly into this is ridiculous. Why am I this far into this? So I popped this up here. Due to the current economic climate, the light at the end of the tunnel has been turned off. Let me clarify where this is coming from. I approached a lot of banks when I first started out, right? I figured, yeah, I only need to raise $500,000 to buy this equipment. What bank in Austin, Texas wouldn't want to back somebody that wants to make beer for a living, right? Turns out the economic climate in 2009 dictated otherwise. I was laughed at a number of times, which is a very humbling experience to be in a bank thinking that you've got this polished presentation, and then you pitch it, and then there's kind of a little smirk and seriously? So I retooled my pitch. I went back in to a separate bank and pitched to them. I had this great idea that we would collateralize all of our equipment, right? So we buy this, and then, if things go awry, you as a bank, you have my equipment, right? Everybody wants to start a brewery, so you can sell that stuff off super quickly. That was laughed at even more. So my second big plan also didn't really materialize the way that I thought it would. So I got really depressed. I had this vision. I've literally given up a career that was that I really enjoyed in the running industry, and I dove into this head first. My climate started caving in. My emotional climate started caving in, and I needed help. So I went back to the Front Range. The Front Range, what I'm referring to, is the Front Range of Colorado. I went back to Boulder first. Visited with some friends, and then I went to Fort Collins, where I met with some of my favorite, still to this day, people in the industry that work at Odell Brewing. If you've never had any of their beer, it's fantastic. If you make it to Fort Collins, go visit them. But I went in with a lot of questions. Is this something that I should actually do? Am I stupid for trying to do this? Is Austin just not there yet? At the time, if you recall, in 2009, there were only a couple of breweries here. It was not at all the same climate that we have here now. But I needed these questions answered, because if I wasn't going to do what I was doing in Austin, I was going back to Boulder. because Boulder was a safe place. It was a comfortable place. And it was an easy place for me, at least, to see, okay, if I fail in Austin, I can go back to Boulder. No one will know about it. I can move on. The grass is always greener. This statement now, laughingly, when I put this up there, has a whole different meaning for Colorado. But when I went there, I started looking around. Everybody is successful in breweries. There are banks that are lending to people. There are small investors that are backing breweries. The industry was growing like crazy. And my friends at Odell, when I sat down to talk to them, they looked me in the eye and they said, it's going to be like that everywhere you go. You can come back to Boulder. It's still going to be hard to open a brewery. What you have to do is change your climate. And if you can do that, then people will back you. You've got to show people that you're not just trying to do what everyone else is doing. You've got to do something different. That's what they did when they opened. And to this day, I think just about every successful brewery has done that. They've adapted. So I went back with a lot of energy. I said, all right, I'm going to do this thing. I completely shifted from traditional financing to I'm going to sell some ownership in this business. I'm going to pitch this idea to a lot of people, as many people that would listen to me, and I'm going to find this money. I was determined. Because now all of my friends from back home told me, no, you can't just come back here. That's not going to be good. So now everyone would know if I failed, right? So you got to move forward with it. So I dove into the process. I was able to raise some money. I was able to find a location. And then it got really, really interesting. Okay, so we here in the state of Texas and in the United States are regulated when we make alcohol, naturally, right? The TABC, our local lovely regulatory agency here in Texas, is one of the most interesting, I think, in the U.S. So I joke when I talk to people about who regulates our industry, and pretty much everyone does. And every month when I sit down to pay the taxes that we have to pay on our alcohol, it's like the worst time of the month for me because I get angry about everyone regulating it. But at the end of the day, we've got to have that, right? So I started navigating through the process. I went down to the TABC's office, asked them, how do I do this? I'm going to start a brewery. Isn't that cool? What do I need to do? They also kind of laughed at me when I said that and plopped in front of me the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Code, which is it's probably 400 pages of legalese. And they said, first you should read this. To which I almost responded, how much do I get paid for reading this? My lessons from third grade, I hadn't learned too many from there. So I took this book and I came back. I did not read, nor have I to this day read all the way through the Alcoholic Beverage Code. But I said, you know what, I got to do this. There's no way that I can go back to Boulder. There's no way I can fail here. So I started with the application. Now the application asks some pretty interesting things. You have to give your residence from the time literally you were 18 to the present. You've got to tell the TABC where you've lived, who you've lived with. In Texas, we operate in a 3-tier system, so you can't own a brewery but also own a retail store or a bar or a restaurant. You can't own property and rent that to someone that works in a different industry. It's very, very bizarre. But they literally ask for everything. Every piece of information that you've never wanted anybody to know, the TABC finds out about. Because again, this is booze, this is Texas, and it's got to be regulated. Beer versus ale. This is one of my favorite things to talk about in the regulation of alcohol. We have to call our products here either beer or ale. What's the difference in the two? Quite frankly, nothing. But to the TABC, it's an alcohol percentage. If it's below a certain percentage, we have to call it beer. If it's above, we call it ale. What if you're making a lager that's above? Still got to call it ale. So we're lying to our customers. Absolutely, this is Texas. It's beer and ale. So it's an interesting process to navigate through. I like to jump these shots up here. In no way am I trying to poke fun by posting the Spring Break 2010 picture of the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission investigators. I just thought it was cool that they went to Port Aransas, and this says week 1, so who knows how long this retreat actually lasted. And another kind of fun little regulation in Texas, it's illegal to take more than 3 sips of alcohol in a row while standing. And that is actually still a valid law. So keep that in mind when you're out hanging out with friends. Just make sure you take a seat between every third, and then you'll be ready to move forward. So I went through the process, raised the money, got our actual brewer's permit from the TABC. Now it's time to make beer, right? We've got the paperwork done. We've got the equipment in place. I am not sleeping a wink because I have a bunch of people's money invested in something that I still don't completely know how to operate. But I had confidence, and that's what you need. So it's time to make some beer. So we open for business. We start making beer. It's me, and I have one employee, right? We fill every single tank in our brewery with beer. They're fermenting away, churning away. Life is good. Things are going to be successful. I might have slept a few hours that first night. And I wake up the next morning to go into the brewery, check on things. I walk into the building. All the lights are off in the building. This doesn't really make sense. The lights shouldn't be off. I walk into the brewery, flip a light switch, nothing comes on. So it's 4 o'clock in the morning, right? So there's no sun up yet. So I grab my headlamp, and I'm walking through the brewery, trying to flip switches. Nothing's working, including the chilling unit that cools all of our tanks, that keeps everything the way that it should be so that the beer tastes good. So I make my way over to the control panel that runs all of our electricity. I flip the door open, and it doesn't look quite right. And what I mean by that is the entire face was pulled off of our electrical panel. Overnight, a group of who knows how many had busted into our building and stripped all of the electrical copper conduit out of our building. Like close to, I want to say 10,000 feet of it that was literally distributing all over our building. So this is not a good morning for me. Again, that feeling, that emotional climate of like, seriously? What am I going to do now? I've got all this beer that's going to spoil. It's got no temperature control whatsoever. What do you do? And I remember in the back of my head the meeting that I had at Odell when they said, you've got to adapt. You've got to impact and change your climate. It's the only way you're going to be successful. So we threw a party. We called it Karma Fest. We were able to get an electrical crew in. They replaced at least our electrical wiring over the course of 48 hours. It was October, so it was still somewhat cool here. It wasn't blisteringly hot. So we were able to salvage the beer. So we threw a party. We invited all of our friends to come over and drink this beer with us to help celebrate. We had over 400 people that showed up. We had not even, literally had not sold a drop of beer anywhere. And we were able to make something out of what could have potentially been nothing. But even after that party, I remember sitting there thinking, why in the hell did I do this? Isn't this supposed to be fun and easy and boots wearing, beard wearing, fun beer drinking stuff? This picture always cracks me up because this was actually a photo shoot that someone came in and did, and they told me to look up in the rafters like I was thinking really deeply about something. But that literally was the look that I had for probably the first 2 years we were open. Just bewilderment and like, oh man, I can't believe. So I had some soul searching to do. And I thought long and hard. Obviously, I can't back out on this now. I've got to move forward. But how am I going to do that? How am I going to move forward, make this successful, and not just completely lose my mind, my marriage, my money, everything, my dignity? How am I going to make this happen? And then I remembered why I wanted to do this in the beginning. And it's social climate. Beer is an incredible thing. I've said this a number of times, I think, already this morning. And on a daily basis, I think I throw it out 10 or 12 times. Beer is one of those things that brings people together. My two favorite beverages and the two things that I consume on a day-to-day basis are coffee and beer, and water. Water's in there too. But those two beverages, I strongly, strongly believe that it is next to impossible to sit down with a stranger or someone that you know, enjoy a cup of either one of those beverages, and not talk. It is impossible for that to happen, for me. I don't know, maybe easy for you, but go to any coffee shop in town, go to any pub in town, and you don't walk into silence. Even in a coffee shop, people are chatting, people are talking. They're social. It impacts your social climate. Of course, they can both be abused. You can get the jitters from coffee, and you can get a lot worse from too much beer. But when they're responsibly consumed, it's an incredible thing. And I remembered that that's what I got into beer for. That's why I wanted to open a brewery. I wanted my employees to have a place that was healthy for them to work, that rewarded them. I remember that third grade teacher not paying me for being in detention. And I thought to myself, I want to provide a place that everybody gets compensated for their work, and compensated well. Not minimum wage, not 16, 17-hour days, but compensated well. A place that they can grow in. A place that impacts our economic climate in a good way, that makes it vital, that also positively impacts the environment. That's that piece of climate that's overarching that everybody talks about. And we in beer make a very resource-intensive product. It takes about 8 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of beer. That is not a sustainable model, as I like to say. So it's important that those of us that make this product keep an eye on that, because you can impact your climate. You can be that change that you want to see. And for me, that's what I thought about when I kept telling myself, you're an idiot for doing this. You've got all this money tied up in equipment that obviously no bank cares about, nobody wants to buy. Why are you doing this? This was why. And this, to this day, has shaped everything that we have done at Hops and Grain, because social climate is what convinces you to buy our product. It's what makes you feel good about it, and it makes your consumption that much better, because you can believe in and support and feel good about those that you are buying from. So impacting climate. Let's fast forward a few years. As I mentioned, Abilene has progressed quite a bit. You can now drink alcohol at ACU. You can mix bathe. You can do all those great things that the rest of the world has been doing for a long time. And in Texas, our TABC regulatory climate has shifted dynamically because we as brewers stood up against the distribution lobby, which is who writes all the rules in this state. We fought that through the legislature. When I opened Hops and Grain, you could not sell beer directly to a customer at your brewery. People could come in, they could take a tour, they could buy merchandise, but they couldn't buy beer from us, which to me seems fairly, still to this day, pretty ridiculous. You can do that now. You can sell a pint of beer to someone in a tap room. You still can't sell it to go. We've got a long way to go. But the regulatory climate is changing. The economic climate right now, all of these banks that I approached before, 4 years ago, now, oddly enough, are reaching out to me. I have not carried on a conversation with any of them because, of course, I'm still a little bitter about where were you 4 years ago when I needed this money? You laughed at me. But what we've found is incredible partners locally that have helped us grow, provided us with capital to grow. The economic climate is great. It's shifted because those of us that start small businesses and those of us that work for businesses, we work hard. We try to impact that. And when you work hard and when you spend your dollars in the right place, I think you impact the economy. Legislatively for us, incredible stuff is happening. We can sell beer, as I mentioned. The beer and ale thing has finally kind of shuffled away. You still have to have it on your paperwork, your application. I guess that was the TABC kind of giving in a little bit, but not completely. But on your product, you can now call something a porter or a lager or an IPA without having to state beer or ale on the actual packaging. Sounds ridiculous, but it's a big thing for us. And again, back to that, where were you 3-4 years ago when I needed this, TABC, when you laughed at me and handed me this big book and said, go read this for yourself? So what I hope, at least, that some of you have taken from this, and what I continue to challenge myself with moving forward, is that climate is everywhere. Everything that you involve yourself in has a climate, right? And we can all impact that climate. You can inspire your climate. You can be something that's different. We don't have to follow in the same footsteps as everyone before us. Part of being creative, I think, is identifying that climate and then doing something about it. So, my challenge this morning is one, to drink beer, because it's a great thing for you. Enjoy coffee as well. And through those things, hopefully your creativity and inspiration will shine through so that you can create your own climate, develop your own climate, and impact, ultimately, your own climate.